What's up, guys, and welcome to the theScore eSports podcast. I think this is episode 43. I think so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I am, of course, your host, as always, Colin McNeil. In the studio with me, we got Dennis Gonzalez.
Hey, what's up?
We got Josh Burry.
Yo.
We got another human body in here, too. This is a rarity. I think this is the third time this has ever happened. Someone is sitting beside me.
It's a pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be the third person to be in this room.
I just let him out to dry there.
Who is it?
It's John Mullen. You know him better as BLU. CSGO caster extraordinaire, personality, analyst, and he's here in the studio with us because, John, you were working the NA minor last night and the week prior.
Correct. Yeah, we've been working on it for the last 4 days now. We just wrapped it up yesterday, so we're gonna swing by before the flight out.
Well, it is a pleasure to have you. Really, thank you for stopping by. So, how was your experience with the North American minor, with the studio, the production, everything go according to plan?
Yeah, it went pretty smooth. I think it was a pretty casual event, pretty lower key event than we're used to with some like the big spectacles and whatnot. This was a bit of a smaller one. It was cool that we were in CBC Studios as well, where some like big Canadian shows have been filmed in the past. So we had the pleasure of doing it there. But yeah, it was just a nice little smaller event. I think it's always good to do one of those every once in a while because they're more relaxed. Not under as much pressure, I think.
Yeah, true. I know Sadakis, at least on air, communicated to you the importance of CBC Studio 40 maybe once or twice or more times, which was nice. It is a cool venue. Now, speaking of venues, have you ever been to Toronto before? Is this your first time?
I've been here once or twice because I went to school in Rochester, which is right across the border essentially. So I came up here once or twice just on a few like night trips with some friends from college, but I never like spent like a longer period of time here.
So how did you find it?
It's pretty nice. It was pretty. I didn't get too much time to explore. Unfortunately, we like went to some like restaurants and stuff at night, but I didn't get to walk around all that much. But from what I saw, it was very nice.
You didn't do any touristy stuff?
No, unfortunately not. I didn't even get to go up the Needle or anything like that.
Oh, the CN Tower.
The CN Tower, yeah.
Yeah. Do not get it confused with Seattle Space Needle. Ours is bigger, more impressive. I think Matt went up there, or at least he wanted to when I was talking to him last week. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if he ended up getting up there.
I don't know if he ended up going up there. He might have done it today because he's not flying out till like really late today. So
yeah, it's actually been a treat that the NA minor is in town and downtown, about a couple blocks from our offices, because we did have Sadakis in last weekend. Last week, physically to the office. Did an episode of our series "You Laugh, You Lose" with him. Spoiler alert: he lost. And now we've got BLU in the studio, and we're ready to talk some CS:GO.
Yeah, sounds good. I'm ready for it.
Well, let's do it. Well, one of the things we kind of harp on this in this podcast, but I do think it's like important to talk about, and I like to get everybody's take on it, is caster burnout, caster overworking in CS:GO. You do a lot. Most casters who work, I feel like, in this esport do a lot of events constantly. If you do ESL, for example, like, it's hours and hours and hours, game after game after game after game. I don't know how you guys do it.
Yeah, so I think I'm a little bit luckier than some others simply because I have the benefit now of doing a majority of my shows relatively close to where I live ever since I relocated to Los Angeles last year. So for the most part, I'm doing a lot of shows out of that ESL Burbank studio, which is like a 10-minute drive down the road for me. So that's nothing. That's just going to work and coming home at the end of the day. I think the problem stems from more like the guys, like Sadakis, use him as an example where, he doesn't really have a home base. He's just hopping around constantly, whether it's doing ESL Pro League in Europe out of Copenhagen or then going to another big event. And he's just living out of hotels essentially. So at least I get the benefit of being able to come home for a couple weeks every once in a while and just kind of do work out of LA.
Well, I don't know. We can't see it in your shot, maybe a little bit in mine actually. But speaking of living out of a suitcase, your suitcases are right behind me right now.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
because the minor ended last night, and you've got a flight today back to LA, right?
Yep, going back to LA. Should be there for like 2 weeks, and then I'm out again going to Oakland.
Oh, cool, very cool.
Yeah.
So when it comes to like doing all these events, like doing ESL, do you find that you ever say no to things because maybe you're just like, oh, really? Like, I have to do this back-to-back flight. I have to do this event here and that event there, and I want some time to myself. Do you ever find yourself saying no?
Not yet. Simply because up until recently, when I went back to being a freelancer, because previously I was full-time with ESL, just basically working stuff for them. Up until that point, I never really like had enough work to be able to say that. But in these last like month or two, I've had maybe like a weekend or two off, and that's been it. It's just been grinding out events, and it's usually in a completely different place every weekend end as well. So now I've been starting to think, okay, I need a little bit of time off. But the good news is I have most of December to myself and whatnot. So you just think about things in the future like that, and you just kind of grind through the work. So no, not yet. I haven't felt that yet, but maybe in the future we'll see.
That's fair. I guess it's a good problem to have at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You could view it like that. One hot button issue that's going on right now in Counter-Strike, I feel, is the Valve update with the sound occlusion. Guys, did I get that term right? Sound occlusion.
Correctly.
That's right, yeah. And
Okay.
this is like such a head scratcher for me, but I mean, it sounds like you're about to get into that. So.
Well, actually, I was going to see if Dennis could preface us a little bit with what the changes actually are.
Yeah, so basically and it's important to point this out, how sound worked before is it was pretty much just distance-based. Whatever material that the sound was coming through, whether it be a wall, a door, it wasn't necessarily affected, the sound, I mean. But now that sound occlusion comes in, the material of the wall or the door, and even the thickness and stuff like that, there are all these different properties that take into account of what sound is in CSGO now. And that affects a lot of different sound mechanics, whether it's you're watching, so to speak, certain positions that are X amount far away, or listening for just incoming enemies. Yeah, it fucks up a lot.
Just to boil it down, like if I'm understanding this correctly, before I could, if I'm on like Inferno or something, I can hear a guy like sprinting through apartments really clearly, as if there's no wall, as if he's 3 feet from me.
Exactly.
Now there's this new property that takes into account the quote unquote physical, not physical wall. So maybe I can't hear him as clearly. Maybe I can't hear him at all.
Can't hear him at all. Yeah.
That seems like a huge deal to me personally. John, I don't know how you feel.
No, it's a pretty big shift in it. Unfortunately, I haven't had the chance to test it so much just yet because I've been like going back and forth between like 3 different games. But this is like a major drastic change, right? Because you've had players that have been playing this game for like 10, 15, 20 years in some cases, if CS is getting to that point now, where they've been used to a very linear-based sound engine, and it's basically just been having to listen for these footsteps. They haven't really had to, adjust based on paneling and whatnot. So the problem is now you have these players having to go through a whole relearning process of what certain positions sound like when they're being pushed, things like that. So like to give an example, potentially someone waiting on the outside of Ivy hearing footsteps coming down the lane is going to be way different than someone waiting on the inner site going down ramp. So players are going to have to now invest potentially all this extra time in figuring out, what indicates what in terms of sound. It's not just, a linear thing across the board anymore.
Mm-hmm. So you would say that people who are making a big fuss about this, say on Reddit or Twitter or whatever, they're not, they have license to, they're not exaggerating.
Yeah, no, because it's a pretty drastic change based on the way that it's been adjusted here now. It's unfortunately like you kind of just have to deal with it. There's not a whole lot you can do because it's Valve's judgment at the end of the day. But it is like a big surprise change. Once again, unfortunately, the communication from Valve has been the greatest on this, so it did kind of get surprised and sprung on everyone, which has happened a few times in the past as well.
I want to talk a little bit more about that, about Valve's supposed motivations and things like that, because like you just said it, like CS is old, right?
Yeah. It's been years. I mean, I've only been in it for a very short amount of time, but it's been there since the late 90s, essentially.
Right, exactly. And over that time, even CSGO, right? Even in CSGO, things have like solidified. And I like when games get to a point where they haven't changed so much and you can see that the meta changes itself. Like teams come up with new strats, then there's anti-strats to that, and so on and so on and so on. I love seeing the natural evolution of the meta. Why does Valve do things like this? What is the idea?
I mean, at the end of the day, right, they're still trying to improve the game. They do have the best intentions about it. It's just oftentimes it's questionable about, why they're trying to improve certain things. It almost seems like at some points in time they're trying to improve things that don't need to be improved. So it just seems like there might be a disconnect between them and the community almost in certain cases, because there's not really a whole lot of discussion between Valve and players. As far as I know, that's been improving recently as of late, though, as I've noticed. Obviously, I don't really talk to Valve that much, but I've been noticing tweets from players and whatnot where like they're actually getting DMs from like the CSGO Twitter account now asking for more information about issues in the game. So I think that over the last like 4 to 6 months, that has been steadily improving, but it was a very major issue in the past, especially when things like the R8 got added, and that was just like, that was like a stab in the back to most players. Like, what is this? This is a joke. Like, what is the Valve team doing? Everybody was just lambasting Valve for like a month period. Well, that was a huge issue. But like I said, I think it's slowly getting better. I don't think it's as big of an issue as it was in the past, and I think we are seeing steadily improved communication between Valve and like the pro community and whatnot.
I sort of have a theory on this one, and maybe it's a bit far-fetched, so conspiracy theorists, get your tinfoil hats on, get ready. But honestly, we've seen this game since release changes have happened. A lot of the time, they weren't announced. Or like this was great. This is a great example. All right. This option was on the test environment and it was optional. And then suddenly it just gets enabled.
You're talking about sound occlusion?
Yes.
Okay.
And suddenly it just gets enabled and it's default and you can't disable it on like matchmaking or whatever. That to me just speaks to this impulse within Valve to improve this game. And I think improve is the right word. Mm-hmm. But I think the goal of this is to slowly bring the game towards a more modern incarnation of the game. And when I say that, I mean that if you look at what the essence of Counter-Strike is and you compare it to what other FPS games today are like, it is a different game. And I think it's different in a good way. I'm not saying like, let's make Counter-Strike like Call of Duty. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that Counter-Strike in its current incarnation is very clearly a game that originated in the past. And I think some of these changes are trying to reach an audience that maybe the game hasn't been able to reach. Now, sound occlusion is a small thing, admittedly.
Right.
It's not...
Especially for a casual audience. It's like your 2 or 3 hour a day player is not really going to care too much about that.
Right, exactly.
John, I just bought the game because sound occlusion. What are you talking about?
But like my point here is we've seen like weird stuff like the gun sound change. Remember when they changed the gun sound? Everyone's like, why did they change the gun sounds? And like a lot of people were kind of upset. A lot of pros were a little bit upset about the guns. Like, why even do this? Like, why do this? And in my opinion is slowly but surely Valve is transforming to do a little bit of a Deus Ex allegory here. They're turning the human into the machine slowly, bit by bit. It's very cyberpunk. And one day we're going to wake up and we're just going to have an AUG, not the gun, but an augmented CSGO.
Gee, did you think about this beforehand?
No,
this
it
is
was
very
terrible.
well thought out.
Yeah, so anyways, that's kind of my thought. And I wonder if it's some of it is not testing the limits of the player base too. And again, this is maybe where it gets a bit conspiracy theory, but like, how loudly do we have to complain for sound occlusion to be removed? I don't know.
The thing is, right, is if they are even going to remove it, because there had to be massive outcry just for the R8 to get changed, and that was like very obvious from within the first 2 to 3 hours of that gun being put into the game. It was like, nope, this thing needs to be gone right now. It's way too overpowered.
Yeah.
Get it out of here. Thankfully, that got adjusted pretty quickly. But I think something like sound occlusion is something that I think they're going to want the community to test more. I think that's part of the issue. Is I don't think Valve gets enough testing done internally on these sorts of issues, because as far as I've heard through hearsay and other issues, that the Valve dev team for CS:GO is very, very small. So I don't think that they're able to appropriately test major feature changes or major just changes to core systems like this appropriately. So they kind of have to force it on the user base slightly in order to try and get more data and figure out if these are good changes or not. Take, for instance, right, the Negev change. That's been in the game for like 6 months almost now, and it's still $2,000. And it's still like some tournaments it's a very clear rule, some tournaments it's an unspoken rule. It's like, okay, do not buy this thing just because it's very cheesy and it's going to piss people off.
Right. It's kind of like the way auto snipers used to be before Go, I guess. That it's like you just don't do it. But people did it anyways. But anyways, like my point here is I think if there was enough outcry, it could be reversed. But I don't think that's what Valve wants. I think Valve wants to slowly put these modern sort of things into the game, and slowly but surely we're working towards some other thing.
Source 2.
Chimera. Source 2. Yeah, exactly. And that game, I suspect, this is my own personal opinion again, will look a lot different from what we see in Go. I think they're going to push some changes in whatever the next version of Counter-Strike is that are really going to, I think it's going to be sort of a shock to the system at first. But I think what they want is a game that looks more like what some audiences are used to. Because Counter-Strike, again, love the game. I'm a huge fan, play 1.6. Like, I'm a loyalist, trust me. But I think Valve wants to reach a bigger, wider audience. And to do that, they need to modernize some aspects of this game that honestly are a little bit antiquated. That's what I think, at least. So, I
don't think we would ever get an outright new version of CS entirely, simply because of how Valve seems to be operating as a company now. They almost don't even seem like a game company anymore when you look at what projects they do. They seem more of like a technology like startup almost when you look at like their investments into VR, and that the fact that they just manage Steam. I mean, they have like infinite bankroll because they own Steam essentially. But it seems like they're more invested into those projects now than they are with the games that they've worked on in the past. Like we obviously had the drama that was surrounding the Half-Life creators that happened a few months ago too, where there was that story published by I think it was Laidlaw or one of the lead writers that was on Half-Life. They were basically, it seemed like, okay, this, like, Half-Life seems like it's a dead series then based on this, or that it's certainly, if it ever does come out, it's not going to be what the original creators intended for it to be. So it's this weird shift in Valve's internal structure, where I think that while we are going to see CS:GO continue to evolve, and we could see very major drastic changes probably whenever Source 2 is added, I don't think that, at least not anytime soon, we would ever see a completely new version of CS that would restart everything.
I guess they could do sort of what they did with Dota 2, where it's just like a very expansive rework of the game. So even if the name of the game is similar, there's so many things that are different about it. Even like the user experience outside of the game is very different, to the point where it's like, yeah, it's still the same game, but it's substantially different, to the point where it would be considered almost like a new version of the game, even though it is still the same game. Like, if you own it, you still own it.
There's a much bigger issue, however, with doing that to CS:GO compared to what they did with Dota, where Dota, like, you can change probably some of the deeper core systems and it wouldn't impact the pro level gameplay so much, whereas CS:GO is such a very specific game when it comes to hitboxes and, for, like the first bullet accuracy, all these very minute issues that, while, from a layman's perspective may not seem like a huge deal, for the pro community are giant. And if they even change that slightly with a new version of CS:GO, the pro community is just going to hate it and reject it. So they really do have to take their time and make sure that it's, as one-to-one as possible in terms of the play style, compared to, CS:GO on Source 1 and CS:GO on Source 2, if that eventually does happen.
Yeah, it even speaks to the difference in philosophy with the pro scenes for Dota and CS:GO, where Dota is very much defined by the changes in the game, both in the meta and mechanically. With the map changed like however many times within the year. But like, I mean, the same sort of things happen with CS:GO in like, we just got Dust 2.
Right.
But like, it's very much a piecemeal thing. It's not like a wholesale, like every map is changed. Like, that would, like, imagine if every single map was changed at once in CS:GO. Like, that would be insane. Like, all strats are out the window, basically.
Yeah, it would be crazy, to say the least.
I guess that is the only way you can change this game, as you said, it piecemeal, really small parts, individually, with time removed between each single change.
And that's actually what I think they are doing. I think they are drastically changing the game, but in little tiny bits over time.
Yeah.
And by the way, when you said hitboxes, Blue, shout out to CS Source hitboxes, because everybody hated that. I remember people were like, what? Like, oh yeah, that's so good. Anyways, I just remember being in tunnels on Dust 2. And getting a headshot, and I was just like, "There's no way, man! Like, what happened?" And then, anyways, hitboxes, great, wonderful.
Wow, you got some PTSD there, right?
I do. I have a ton.
To bring up the war stories from that one,
yeah. Oh yeah, remember Dust 2 on CS Source when it launched? Yeah. Anyways.
Now, Blue, I want to take you back to about 10 minutes ago. You mentioned something. I didn't want to stop the conversation, but you said you're doing 3 games right now?
Yes, somewhat. I'm going back and forth, actually, between a few games. So a couple of months back towards June, around E3, I got the chance to do the new version of Quake, and I was able to do a couple events with that. And I'm also helping out ESL and Oculus as they're doing a VR tournament circuit, and I'm also casting that at the moment too, which is very different. I'm going to say it's definitely completely separate from like any other game that I've casted in the past.
Wow, that's really cool. Now, not to I don't want to keep you and have you miss your flight here, but that kind of makes me wonder, like, how did you get into casting CS, and then what are your motivations? Because it sounds like you're willing to experiment, to branch out and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I always love like new technologies and new games and all, especially if it's a game that I'm very much interested in. I'm never gonna say like no to casting a game simply because it's not CS or it's not something else. If it's a game that I like playing, odds are I'm gonna be okay with jumping into a tournament and attempting to cast it at least. But to get back to your point and about more how I got into CS, I actually started not in FPS, but I started in MMO as a caster. I started in Guild Wars 2, which is a game that was very much off the map in terms of eSports, and unfortunately remained that way up until the very end. But I casted that game for almost 3 years, and then I met some people as I was starting to get more into CS:GO, just casually playing it, and they gave me a few opportunities casting it, and things kind of just went from there. I switched over to CS:GO as my main game and just grinded it out from that point forward, and eventually made my way up to like working with ESL full time.
Now, you guys were telling me when we were speaking before John got here that there is a Riot caster who started in that same game. Is that the case?
Well, Azale, I don't know how much he was casting. I think he was casting some, but he was like a pro player.
He was in. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay, my
and
bad.
he actually, for one of the tournaments that he had a chance to cast recently, I'm pretty sure he actually asked to go be able to compete still.
Oh my God.
Like he's still pretty good. I don't know what the scene looks like for Guild Wars 2. Admittedly, I only really played it at launch for a bit.
It's unfortunately it's pretty much dead at this point as far as I know. There hasn't been any major tournaments as of late. It's mostly been like online stuff, and it seems like the dev input on it has been pretty much grinded to a halt too. So I don't think there's going to be anything else. It's pretty much dead in the water at this point.
You heard it here first, folks.
That sucks.
Unfortunate, but it had a lot of like issues and stuff that never really got fixed. Just core viewership issues and things like that with trying to expand it, and it always just seemed like the community was against it as a whole. The game trying to be a competitive title, so that didn't help it either.
Yeah, that situation's never good when the community's against what the developer wants. Or now, Blue, at this office, we watch a lot of CS:GO, especially the three individuals who are in this room, and by that we are intimately familiar with different casters and their styles. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you is how you perceive your sort of like identity in the world of CS:GO casters specifically, because I feel like everyone has a different niche, everyone is colored with a different brush and that kind of thing, and I just wanted to know like how you think Blue is as a caster.
For me, what I always try to strive to be is just purely a play-by-play caster. I don't really like to identify myself as like a very in-depth analyst or anything like that. I purely want to be a play-by-play caster who is really good at explaining the narrative of what's currently going on, explaining some more minute things that may be happening on the side to newer viewers or those that may not be able to see the full picture, whether they're just watching an audio stream or something like that, and just making obviously like the really hype moments, just making those as hype as possible. I've tried to focus on entirely that, so that's why when you're watching me cast, you really don't hear me go into analytics. You won't hear me like break down a round or anything like that. I almost always just leave that entirely to my co-caster.
I'm glad you said that, because I was actually telling these guys before, I'm like, Blue is like an excellent play-by-play, like that specific style. And I feel like maybe it's lacking a little bit. And it's interesting that you, like in the greater sphere.
I understand.
And it's interesting that you also brought up audio. I know Semler in the past has advocated, perhaps half jokingly, for broadcasts that work as well on audio as they do in video.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people consume CS in audio. It's probably not that many. I actually do sometimes. I actually will, if I've done it at the gym or whatever, if I'm like going home and I don't know, I just don't want to watch the phone or it's not convenient for me, and I will do that. And if you have two people who have styles that are more meandering or storytelling, it's actually quite difficult to discern who's winning and what's going on.
It's all very subjective at the end of the day, right? Like different strokes for different folks. So some people are going to hate that kind of very direct and just explaining what's on the screen kind of style, but other people, which I found to be a pretty large portion based on like just looking around and trying to figure this out. A pretty large portion of people, in my opinion, will like just watch an audio version of it, or they'll be like looking away from their screen. They have two monitors. They might not be entirely paying attention. So if you describe something, well, it may seem obvious to someone who's directly watching the video. If someone is looking away, but it sounds interesting, they'll be like, oh wait, let me look back all of a sudden, and then you get their attention back onto the screen. So that's kind of why I've picked that style. There's oftentimes, for instance, this weekend, right, I worked with Seaside, who's also predominantly a play-by-play caster. So oftentimes when you have those mixes, you still have to expand into a more hybrid role and go into a little bit of color. But say when it's like me and Dazed or someone else like that, or me and Launders, I can focus purely on the play-by-play and leave all of the analytical stuff to whoever's with me.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, I'm a big fan of the audio style broadcast for esports because in Canada, data plans are very expensive. So honestly though, I've had times where I would put up a Twitch stream and just set it to the audio because I don't want the video. I don't want to
waste all your data.
I don't want to waste all my data on the stream, right? And there have been times where that's been actually really good, like certain kinds of casting. Like you said, I think the play-by-play helps a lot for stuff like that. But other times it's been like very colory, sort of floaty commentary.
Yes.
And when that happens, it's like almost impossible to discern what's happening. Maybe you find out who wins a round or what the deficit is, or like, oh, this is an eco round or something at the beginning of the round. But
honestly, there have been casts where they don't tell you who won the round. I have definitely watched like some ECS or ESL games or whatever where they don't mention it, possibly because the round is an obvious one. Like let's say it's like a really brutal eco or something. And there's like, maybe I'm not watching it.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned a couple partners that you've cast with in the past. Do you have you're not like attached to the hip at anyone right now, are you?
No, I'm not, and I actually tweeted this the other day. I'm kind of frustrated about this because I feel like it's been holding me back in the fact that I haven't been able to find someone to work with as a caster like full time. I have been able to find a full on duo. Now I was working with Daze for like the first like 6 months or so of this year, but he went on to play for GX, which is now done with. So I'm might be talking with him about trying to do some stuff more if he wants to get back into that, of course. Because that's perfectly up to him. And I always knew that he made it very clear from the start, and I understood this as well, that if he ever did get unbanned, he was going to go back to play. I was like, yep, that's perfectly fine. So we knew that right from the get-go, that probably wasn't going to last. But then I was working with Launders as well, so I'm doing some stuff with him too. But it just seems like just to quote my own tweet, this month alone, I've worked with 6 different people in CS:GO. I've casted with 6 different casters, so it's a little bit hard for me to like grow myself and improve myself when I constantly have to focus on making sure that the duo is good. Because I also don't want to overshadow the other person or undershadow myself, things like that. Because then I just look like an asshole in certain situations if I'm talking over him the entire time. So I have to make sure that my co-caster shines just as much as I do in these casts, so that we both look good.
Yeah, it's tough out there, I would say, if you don't have a locked-in duo. I can imagine it being very difficult. We know from after Anders and Semler sort of broke up, for lack of a better word. They've been casting with a lot of different people. I know we've been keeping our eye on who they pair well with and things like that. And I just don't feel like any of it's taken so much. And I feel like somehow the two are lessened when they're not together, at least at this point. I'm not saying they won't find their stride with someone else.
It's weird because I don't think this is a dynamic that most people are actually familiar with, truthfully.
Which?
Because, like the idea of being in a consistent duo as your like job. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like most people work in a team environment or they work primarily alone, but like to always have that other person be hopefully who you are working with, and to develop with that person and to be able to communicate things that might be uncomfortable. Like it might be a situation where you're like, listen, I need a little bit more time to explain this, or like that whole situation is difficult. And most of the time, most human beings working in a duo are probably working with a dog. You know what I'm saying? Like you're probably a police officer with a dog, or the dog doesn't talk back to you. So I honestly think it's a rare thing. If you think about it, there aren't that many times where it's like you and this other person are the thing that is happening.
Never thought about it like that.
It's difficult, and I don't have anybody that I know that would know enough about esports that I'd want to duo cast with for like 3 years. Sorry, Dennis, but you know what I'm saying? Like I'm not a caster, but like I can't think of anybody that I would say like,
I don't know,
definitely
Josh.
that guy.
I thought we made a pretty good team on This Week in Esports. I guess I was wrong, if you remember that show.
Well, you just started playing Heroes of the Storm. I've done a little bit of recreational Heroes of the Storm casting in my spare time, so get good at that game, and then we'll form a casting duo in that game for some rec stuff, and there you go.
I'm fucking ready, man.
Are you ready?
Try it on my Jaina, bro.
Oh my God.
The other issue with the two, somewhat anyway, is and this has only happened more recently, in that there's not a lot of casting that's done purely online anymore, where it's just 2 casters from their bedroom. There's still very like small tournaments of CSGO that do that, but that's when you're getting down to like tier 3, tier 4 tournaments. Almost every single like tier 1, tier 2 match nowadays is done in some kind of live environment, whether it's in a studio or at an actual event. So it's actually very hard to like experiment with different casters too. I can't just be brought onto a show and be like, by the way, I want to work with this caster. Usually that's either predetermined already when I'm brought onto the show, or there's like very limited options due to the budget for the show or something else like that. If I want to work with someone who has like a much higher day rate than say this other guy, then it's it's not feasible to bring the exact person that I want onto the broadcast. And that's an issue that's only happened recently. So this is actually affecting new casters pretty poorly too, because they can't really establish any new duos because they're basically just being brought on. It's like, yeah, you're working with this guy. If you don't like it, deal with it. Yeah. But again, it's not a thing that the organizers need to change. It's more so of an issue of just the fact that, again, it's the geography of where these shows are being filmed from, things like that, the budgets and all that. So it's not really anything that can unfortunately be changed at this point in time, unless we went back to doing primarily online broadcasts, which obviously would be a step back. So that's probably not going to happen.
Yeah. The flip side to that is kind of, I think for a lot of the duos that are out now, or were iconic, such as like Anders and Semler. I think a lot of the situations surrounding, I guess, their origin stories was very much kind of a shotgun wedding, like the situation that you're describing. Like I remember Sato telling me like when he was casting with Henry G for the first time, I think they were in Romania, and they were like, "Here, you're casting with this guy," and he was like, "Yeah, I had to tell Henry G to shut up like after a broadcast because he kept talking over me." I was like, I need to tell him to shut up. He talked for like a full round, blah blah blah. But like nowadays that like esports is much bigger, I think there is or should be that opportunity for very much like pre-planned duos when going into an event. Again, I think it should come from the side of the tournament organizers to recognize that I guess problem, for lack of a better term. But I think the onus is maybe a bit on them as well to reach out to casters to be like, if they have like this prime person, say a Semler or say an Anders, it's like, who do you want to work with? Kind of thing. I don't know.
It's also an interesting idea because as a caster, and this is something that you would actually know about Blue, and I'm just sort of like, this is all hypothetical from my position, but like, I feel like if you have a certain value, or you can like perceive that you have a certain value to tournament organizers, it's also hard to kind of just like reach out and be like, well, this guy's a color caster, like maybe we could be a duo, and like reach out to that person and cast with them, because A, like you said, you don't get the opportunities to necessarily cast important events with that person, but also B, you're really tying yourself to that person in a dedicated duo, and like you don't know necessarily everything about their past, or like even if they might be the kind of caster that would make it to the same events you would make it to. And so then at that point, it's like, are you just forming a partnership that really doesn't get off the ground at all? Because you're like, I like this guy as a color caster. I try and encourage the event to like bring the color caster on as being my like partner in casting, but like maybe they're just not interested in that guy, and then it's like, well, this did nothing at the end of the day. I don't know. Like, it feels like it could be a difficult situation in that sense.
I mean, I've never gone into a cast and say that it outright hasn't worked per se. So like I usually, like I said, I just try to evolve my own casting style to make it work the best. But I think it would certainly help if I was given the choice. Like if you get brought onto an event, I get to choose who I get to work with. But then you have the problem too, right? Is what about the other guy? You know, what about the other guy that could have potentially gotten hired? He also may not want to work with me, or vice versa, things like that. So it's very much, you know, a double-edged sword. Do you give the talent the power to pick hires on events, or do you leave that with the organizers, where it's relatively neutral in terms of who gets brought onto the event? You don't like start picking favorites and things like that, because then you have to deal with that whole issue, and it is like a conflict of interest if you're not careful with it as well. So you kind of have to watch out for things like that.
I could definitely see some issues arising, actually, now that you mention it, in that regard, everyone picking their best friend kind of thing. And now let me ask you, you said you've casted with, I think you said 6 different people this month?
Yeah.
Let me ask you, who would you most want to duo with if you could cherry pick?
Dazed.
Dazed.
Go back to Dazed, yeah.
Nice.
That was
shit.
that was probably the duo that worked the best out of all the ones that I worked with, and we seem to have like a really good dynamic. We set it up as like, because we did the pure play-by-play and color caster thing that seemed to work really well between us, and a lot of other people in the community seem to like that too, since most of the current like top tier duos are more hybridized, where you'll have you know, the color will take over the play-by-play sometime and vice versa, but we kept it pretty strict, so we thought that was like a more unique thing. It was more akin to like traditional sports and what you see there.
Can I give you my fantasy picks?
Go ahead.
For your
Oh
duo.
shit! Here we go.
Sure, let's
I've
hear
got
it.
I've got two. So a couple weeks ago, we had nothing on the podcast. Nothing with a zero. The former
Zero
C9
thing.
We
player.
had nothing, so we didn't.
We had
do the
nothing. We
podcast.
didn't release a
Didn't do it.
podcast. And he had done some stuff with ECS and ESL recently. I know he told us he's not going to do commentary, you know, forever and ever, full time kind of thing. But he has this sort of storytelling. Oh, one time, you know, we pugged with these guys and they did X kind of style, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like he's the opposite of you, and therefore would pair really well with you.
We actually did do one night of ESL Pro League where we casted together too, so that ended up working pretty well when we managed to do that, because it was more like a fun cast as well, because you know it's Jordan, so so he likes to have fun on the broadcast, and that one turned out to be a pretty good cast as well. But like I said, he's not like down to do it full time or anything like that, so that's where obviously that would cut out, because that's opposite to my intentions, where that's basically what I do full time. So
that's right. My other pick is Semler, because I feel like he's got sort of a fun, wacky, he'll go out there, say some crazy shit, you know, tell some story kind of thing. And you maybe could keep him grounded, for lack of a better word, kind of thing. Yeah.
I have noticed that I tend to be for whatever reason, I don't know why, I tend to be like a lot more serious on casts. I don't know if that's just me like trying to remain very professional and whatnot, not trying to cross any lines. But I have noticed that unfortunately, I have trouble like kind of expanding my personality or having more fun on broadcast. So it would be interesting to work with someone, you know, who does like to like mess around a little bit more on broadcast and see if that opens me up a little bit more, because I tend to be pretty close to the chest when on broadcast there and not mess around too much.
I will tell you, as a viewer, I do appreciate the seriousness. I definitely do.
Yeah.
For sure.
Sorry, go on.
No, it's very like situational, right? Because if it's like a lower tier match where the game isn't that interesting to begin with, it's perfectly acceptable to do that simply because you're just adding entertainment to the broadcast. You're keeping viewers entertained. If the match is like really boring and you're just seeing the same set execute happen 6 times in a row, eventually people are going to get bored and turn off the stream. So if the casters are having fun making jokes and people are laughing at it, then that's perfectly fine. But I think if this is like, you know, an ESL 1 event or a major, for instance, and you're in the playoff stage, I don't really think that there's so much room for that. I think it shouldn't really be about the casters at that point. It shouldn't really be about the entertainment. It should be about the teams and the game that's currently going on.
I agree. Maybe I am just like a serious, boring guy, but when I am watching Complexity against NRG on you know ESL at 11 p.m. at night or something, you know, which just happened, you know, I do appreciate the fun caster stuff, but I'm not gonna lie. Sometimes I'm like, call the fucking round, please. Like, maybe I'm doing the thing you said where I'm playing a game and I've got the stream in the background or talking to someone or whatever, and I'm just like, yo, call the round. Like, enough of this shit. But then from your perspective, I always think like, okay, these guys have only been here 12 hours straight. They're probably insane right now and very tired.
That's the other thing, yeah. Sometimes if a broadcast goes on for like a really long time, especially at LAN events where you'll tend to have like a 12+ hour day, depending on the length of the games more than anything else. But if you end up with like a really long day, sometimes you'll just lose track of yourself and you won't even like realize that you're getting loopy or, you know, going off on a massive tangent about something completely irrelevant. And then you like think back like, oh wait, yeah, we're not even talking about the game right now, so we should probably go back to that.
That's kind of one of the interesting things about casting is, in a way, like, you guys are sort of responsible for making sure that great moments remain great. And so there's, in my opinion, there's like sort of the burden of history on you when you're like like, and I honestly think about this a lot for my own job, like writing about esports, that obviously accuracy is extremely important in journalism generally. But when we're talking about something that might be cited as a source later because there's not a lot of stuff being written about it, it's so important. And like, I personally feel the pressure of history on me, like, get this right, make sure it has all the detail you can get, because later somebody is going to really appreciate it. And things later will be made better by it. And there are so many, like, we've been doing classic caster calls recently. We've been doing a series of videos.
Yeah, that's right.
I think we have League and CSGO out already. I don't know. Dota's out, actually, I think.
Yeah,
maybe they're all out.
We have all three, I believe.
I think they're all out now. And that series of videos, it's like, those are great moments, but they're enhanced by casting. And the scariest thing, I think, would be if you were joking around when something truly incredible happened.
Yeah.
Like, that almost is like a nightmare if that happens.
It's not only that too, but I tend to get, whenever I have the opportunity to cast like a grand final, I get really nervous, and I always like go back to the production after the first map and be like, all right, how are we handling the winning moment? Because that's like a really important moment at the end of these tournaments, and oftentimes it can be very mishandled by the casters. I haven't casted so many grand finals, so I'm a little bit inexperienced with it, but that's like a really important part of the tournament. And if you mess up, if you like misspeak even one detail, it's a really bad thing, and it like ruins the moment for a lot of people. So you have to make sure that things like that are really perfectly secured. There's casters that oftentimes as well, just by the timing of it, end up like they're like cracking a joke over like a really nice play, and they have to all of a sudden switch from like laughing to like, oh my god, blah 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 blah. But then there's there's other times where it just works out perfectly. Like similar casting, I think it was the Happy Deagle kill back in late 2015. That was DreamHack London, if I remember it properly.
We've been using that clip a lot lately.
Yeah. So that clip, for instance, like that was done perfectly, things like that. But there's a chance he was joking around with Anders, and that could have gone really badly, and that clip might not have looked anywhere as close to epic as it was because the casting wasn't as focused or something like that. But he did it really well, and I think that only amplified the moment and made it look like 3 times as awesome. You
just hit on it there. We like I said, we've been using that clip a lot recently. It's in our top 10 CS:GO caster moments.
I'm sure it is. Yeah.
And myself and one of our reporters co-wrote that article, and I remember I was writing about the Semler one, and it's just, to me, it's just such a clear example of how the call elevates it, right?
Yes.
Look, it's not the first Eagle Ace that ever happened. No. It's not going to be the last. It's spamming through smoke. I'm not saying, I'm not taking anything away from the moment, but like, it's similar. He's so happy. He's like delirious with happiness, right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I think was it number 1 on our list. It's the Big Apple and Snacks is Hungry. You know, like
Actually,
holy
yeah.
shit,
Yeah,
dude! Like that makes it a 10 out of 10. Like you know,
Yeah.
takes from gold to platinum.
Yeah, to that point, watch any of those videos and turn the sound off. It's not the same.
I was just about to say that
Not the
if you
same.
watch the clip with the casting and then mute it, it doesn't look anywhere close to as good.
Yeah.
As if you were actually listening to the sound and things like that. And the wordplay oftentimes makes it pretty good too. Like Sandokus is really good at that. Really good at making these he's got like metaphors or something like that in the middle of his casting and just making a moment like that much more awesome because he said those words. Like just little things you can add. Like for instance, if people end up like this happened to be, I think it was yesterday or the day before, it was a pistol round and both players ran out of ammo, so they both had to pull out knives. You just say, like,
Oh
you just
shit!
say-
What game was that?
I don't remember which teams it was, unfortunately. I think it was CLG and someone else. I forget who they were playing. But
I
you
wish
know,
I was watching that.
you can amplify things like that just with little wordplay. Like I think if I remember correctly, both guys pulled their knives. And I was like, "It's fight night," and then it's just something funny like that, and it probably just adds a little flair to the cast.
That's how you get your clip on Reddit, folks.
Yeah,
that's how you
Yeah,
get
yeah.
front page of Reddit.
Yeah.
Very much so. Another skill I really appreciate is, I think we touched on this already, but like taking the games, again, I don't want to harp on these teams. Complexity and NRG, that's just my pretend example game. Two awesome teams, bunch of great guys. But
Damn, but walk that back, Colin.
what's that?
I said walk that back. You're like I'm watching Complexity and Energy. Oh, it's so boring, but 2 great teams, full of great guys.
It's not so boring.
Okay.
I know Dennis loves Slemmy. They're a great bunch of
Slemy's my boy.
guys. I've actually heard
Yeah,
a lot
boy.
of good things about Complexity personally, like on a personal level. People have told me
Yeah.
that they're a really nice group of
Oh yeah,
guys.
yeah.
Anyways, now that I've buttered them up a little bit, I really appreciate the skill of when you're casting a game like that. You said you see the same strat 3 times in a row, 4 times in a row, whatever, and you can take what appears to be sort of a bland, ordinary moment or play, and you can elevate it, and you can give that little window to me, the viewer, and just make me go, oh shit, that actually was a huge deal. That nade or that flash
Yeah.
or whatever, or that does damage their economy. Holy shit, I thought that was like nothing.
Yeah, imagine
You know?
if the Dosia grenade wasn't caught. Like no graffiti, no front page. Like
Yeah.
the caster caught that basically.
Right.
As it was happening.
Oh, what a moment.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's really good. Well, I mean, so me and Seaside actually missed something pretty big in one of the matches we were casting 2 days ago. So that's a great example of how casters can actually mess up. Like, so there was an execute that Misfits did, which was something that got put onto Reddit first, either by I was trying to figure this out after the fact because I went and looked it up afterwards, and it was either from like a Chinese team or Virtus Pro did it first. I couldn't figure out which was which, but essentially the strat was to, instead of execute onto A-Site Mirage with smokes, use decoys. However, the thing is,
Yeah.
on A-Site Mirage, you're going to see when smokes and whatnot are coming in a good 2 to 3 seconds before they actually end up blooming. So what ended up happening there is Liquid were on CT side, and they panicked because they saw nades coming over the top at ramp, and we're like, oh god, they're about to execute. We need to use our counter nades now. So they baited them into using their counter nades, and then a few seconds later, then they used their actual execute once Liquid had nothing left to hold it back. And unfortunately, at the time, we didn't catch that. So that would ended up being like a pretty big deal. We missed that, and they pretty much won the round solely because of that strat. So unfortunately, there are certain times where we miss situations like that, and it does lead to unfortunate circumstances where we don't get to immediately relay that to the viewer. Under that case, though, Steel caught it and told the community about that. So at least the community did find out about that. Yeah.
Unfortunate circumstances, also known as front page Reddit threads. Got it.
We
Euphemisms.
know about those.
Euphemisms. No problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, there's one sort of larger subject that we wanted to get into. We know that you're not, you're a caster, you're not in bed with Valve, you're not a businessman, you're not an investor, whatever, but we do like to talk about these overarching esports issues with our guests sometimes.
Okay.
And I wanted to sort of like pick your brain on how should I put this? The ecosystem of CSGO as it relates to investors. We're seeing in esports right now, especially this year, massive changes, massive title shifts in money in leagues. Like we've got the NALCS Riots League fully franchised, massive buy-in from huge traditional sports entities. Of course, we have Blizzard's Overwatch League. The Dota major minor system has been completely overhauled, perhaps to better equip it to bring investors in, to bring outside money into an ecosystem that otherwise was like sort of unfriendly to it. Now, CSGO hasn't had that title shift. It's probably the only one that hasn't changed. And I just wanted to get your general thoughts on if it is a receptive environment to money, sponsorship, investment.
I think honestly the biggest problem CS:GO has, especially when we look at these traditional sports and just non-endemic investors coming into esports, the biggest problem that CS:GO seems to have is the subject matter, from what I've found. And that I mean, and this is pretty obvious, right? It's like terrorists, things like that, and that's obviously a big issue in the world right now. So I've noticed that there's a lot of brands that aren't necessarily inherently connected to video games that don't even want to touch that, especially especially like in the TV space and the normal sports space. There was like the issue when ESPN eSports first got announced, and they weren't really covering CS:GO for the first couple of months, and that eventually had to change because it was such a big game. But just things like that, where it seems to be holding CS:GO back to a smaller degree. I don't think it's anything massive, and I think there is some perks in the fact that we're not getting this investor money, as it is creating a bubble, I do fear, in a lot of these other games, and especially in the North American esports ecosystem. But I don't think CS:GO has that much of an issue yet, because it seems to still be all managed from inside of the community.
Now, this predates my time a little bit in esports, so maybe all three of you guys can help me out here. ESPN, their trepidation towards CS:GO, was that implied or outwardly stated to be because of the subject matter?
I don't know if they ever publicly confirmed it, but it was like the Disney, like
is that the thought?
It was never.
Sort of
that was the general thought amongst the community. I don't think there was ever a statement made on it, and they do cover it now. So they've changed it since, like I said, it's just a massive game. You can't really ignore it. But it seemed at the time that it was due to the fact that it was Disney, and Disney's just a massively family friendly brand, and they don't want to get involved with something like that. They don't want to have pictures of terrorists in a video game on the front page of their website. So that was the thought pattern, I think, amongst most of the community as to why they weren't covering it at first.
When you said actually big organization that might be scared of the subject matter, my mind actually did go right to Disney. Now, Disney is an investor in Axiomatic, right?
Yes.
And Axiomatic is Liquid?
Yes.
Yes, that's right.
Now, of course, Liquid, they are in CSGO in a big way. That's interesting. So they're sort of at arm's length, but it's still a connection.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if it was an ongoing investment. It was part of their accelerator program, which I think was kind of a one-time thing. Correct me if I'm wrong.
It was just a single round of investments?
I believe so.
It wasn't any major buyout or anything like we've had with some of these teams in the past. I think it was more just investor money coming into the pool. So I think the thing is, right, Disney's probably okay with that because it's a very loose association. Whereas compared to, like I used the example before, like a photo of in-game footage of CSGO on the front page of ESPN eSports, where they would probably not be okay with that, because if someone's parent looks at that and they're sheltering their kids, they don't want them to be talking about that sort of subject matter, they could go complain to Disney, and then that creates brand issues for them. So that's probably why they avoided it at first.
Well, I'm a huge Dennis Gonzalez fan. And, wow. So I read everything you write, and I know that you wrote something about space soldiers and about how even in the Turkish sort of scene, this subject matter was like affecting the ability to get sponsors and whatnot.
Yeah, basically, like the long story short is I mean, okay, not to put words into
this was your interview with Xantares, right?
Xantares, and also I had an interview with the CEO, Bunyamin,
yes.
If I'm pronouncing that right, probably butchering.
You gave it the best shot, Dennis.
Yeah. Long story short, like Turkey is not hot on CS:GO, quite frankly, because of the subject matter. It's something that's quite close politically to the situation that's happening in Turkey. And so that has an effect on investorship. And so Bunyamin has stated that like he's not tied to Turkey, even though that's where the team is situated. And now that Space Soldiers has qualified for the offline qualifier for the major, like I'm sure he's looking abroad even more so than before.
Well, there was that interview. I think it was, I want to say it was 3 months ago about. It was sometime in August or early September, if I recall correctly, where they were saying that like they're not committed to a Turkish roster. They want to create like a new phase.
That was actually my.
I think that was our interview.
Same thing. Yeah. So So I mean,
you're also a Dennis fan.
It was actually really weird to see that interview, right? Because it kind of seems like just a stab in the back to your players. Like
kind of,
It's just like, oh yeah, you're not important to us. If you perform badly, we're gonna get rid of you. So that was a little bit weird. But now that they've qualified, I'm not entirely sure if they're going to go down that route anymore. If the pure Turkish roster continues to improve, I'm sure they'll be perfectly fine sticking with that because they already have a brand established with them. And especially if they can actually qualify for the major, which that's going to be the tough part. But if they can make it that far, I'm sure that they're only going to try to grow that roster from there.
I don't want to go on a Space Soldiers tangent, but just Dennis and Blue, you guys can probably answer this.
Sure.
Do they have usually like a ping issue when they play on online leagues? Is that an issue for them?
Normally, I don't know how often they're able to do this, but I think sometimes they actually do end up relocating somewhere in Europe to play like any
Yes.
important online.
Okay, because I always feel like I feel like they're way better than their record gives them credit for.
Yes.
So like, it's always been my personal thought that if they could get to a LAN, we could probably see some hot shit from them.
They've already shown on LAN. ES1 Cologne this year, they managed to win against. Granted, unfortunately, this was like the only thing they got done at that LAN, and besides that, they kind of dropped out pretty quickly. But they 16-1 or 16-3, something like that. SK at ESL1 Cologne,
Shit.
which that was like what? Like how did that happen?
Yeah.
Like we had to do a double take on the results there. But you know something like that is still able to happen. It's unfortunate they don't have as much experience, so they kind of got run over by teams like Heroic and whatnot after that. But if they can get more and more of that, and I think it's just going to be a slow process of grinding out LANs for them. Every time they show up to like a tier 2 LAN or something, they usually win it. Is the thing. So they took the minor, they won the MDL finals that happened about a month or two ago. So they're pretty good on LAN. It's just unfortunate in Turkey the routing to most of the main European servers isn't that great. So oftentimes they end up losing online just because of ping issues and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. And just to circle back on that, they do have a team house in Cologne, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So we'll be seeing more of them.
That
for
definitely
sure.
helps solve that issue.
I don't want to get into a cultural history of Turkey, so I'm not going to. But it is kind of
Okay.
it is important to note.
Yeah.
It is important to note that the word terrorism probably means a lot of different things to that region of the world than it does to us. The idea of like what a terrorist is, etc. So like I understand the trepidation, but obviously I also know it's just a video game and none of it's actually happening. Especially because everybody knows you could get an AK for like way less than $2,700, right? I'm sure. So this obviously isn't real, guys. Like, come on. Anyway,
Jesus.
yeah, I'm sure.
Blue, do you think, like, you already said that it's not going to happen anytime soon, you know, the next iteration of Counter-Strike, the next full iteration, right?
Yeah, like a completely new game.
When it does eventually happen, we can't keep playing the
Maybe
same
it won't.
game, you know? Do you think there's ever a possibility that we get rid of CTs and Ts and it becomes, I don't know, cops and robbers? Like, I honestly don't know.
Red team, blue team.
I mean, it's. I would say that that's a possibility. It would really depend on how culture shifts over the next 5 years or so. Because I wouldn't say there'd be another version of CS:GO until 2020 or something like that. Even going back that far, I don't think it would happen the next 2 or 3 years. It'd be way further back than that because Valve seems to be working on Source 2.0, which would be for all intents and purposes a new version of CS:GO or a new version of CS. So if there ever was a new version, it would really depend, right, on if the world shifts and we don't see as much terrorism activity, then it probably isn't going to be as much of an issue. But if unfortunately things continue to increase and it does become a bit of a hotspot in terms of discussion, then maybe they'll do what CGS did and just tell casters not to use the word terrorist, just say T's and CTs call the bomb the package, things like that. Because that was apparently how CGS had to handle it.
I was going to bring that up actually. Yeah.
Okay.
I actually have been playing a game Rainbow Six Siege recently. Just got into it. It came out a long time ago. And it's weird how they handle it because technically both sides are operators for the SAS and stuff.
Yeah.
So they call them attackers and defenders. And the way it works is there are heroes that are either one of those two things. Okay. And they have guns and a kit that are based on that thing.
I think
and so there's no terrorists technically in the game.
CT.
I think game devs have actually found a very creative way to get around this, and this would probably be the route that CS would. CS has already kind of gone down this route, but it's just the fact that they're called terrorists is so heavily ingrained in the franchise at this point that it's going to be called that. That's the other issue too, is if they ever tried to remove that, then that would be a problem. Is that people are used to it being terrorists, so they're going to call it that. But I think other game devs that have that whole C's versus CT's element to it usually call them they're like multinational drug cartels or like groups of highly trained mercenaries, things like that, which I think is a creative way to get around it. It works. They're still bad guys, but they're not necessarily terrorists, so they avoid that caveat of culture in a way.
Dennis, he just triggered me into Metal Gear Solid mode. War. BMC's in the war economy.
Never changes.
The nano machines. Dust 2 never changes. Just got reskinned.
New kind of Metal Gear.
I'm gonna have
new kind of tunnels.
I'm gonna have the Metal Gear. What? No, for next episode, I'm gonna have it ready.
Yo, spoiler alert! The new one of the new models, CTs, is Solid Snake. It's totally true. It's a true fact.
Can you cardboard box?
No.
That sucks.
You can boost onto a box.
That's a taunt. It's a taunt that you can open a capsule and unlock it. Yeah, for sure. That's definitely 100%.
Oh, we're getting that. Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
right
we
on.
Need, we need more stuff
Next
that you
next
need
level
to buy.
case openings.
yeah.
Blizzard
This is
style.
news to me. We're gonna add emotes now. We're slowly evolving to Overwatch and CS:GO.
Yeah,
exactly.
Trying to
exactly.
acquaint ourselves with that to get some of the audience back.
The selfie emote. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some really cool dances. I think for sure. If you think about it. Well, imagine you disarm the bomb and you can immediately just emote dance on top of the disarm bomb. You just
Oh no.
Maybe that's one way to like well, what can I even say? Make the terrorists a little more palatable to mainstream media. Look at they're dancing terrorists.
I don't know if we want to do that. Yeah, no, just make the terrorists more cute. Just make them like relatable. Yeah.
Have you seen the new models? I don't know. They don't look that scary.
fucking
One guy looks
handsome.
like Hulk Hogan. The other guy looks like a freaking model.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
like that convict that became famous for being like extremely pretty.
Much like that
Got
gentleman.
that.
It's
I
like
got
for
that,
a
yeah.
cologne ad, bombed by terrorists or something
Yeah.
like that. I don't know.
Yeah, there's actually not to get into this. There is a shitload to unpack. I think with the whole terrorist, counter-terrorist, like what they look like, how they behave, what they're freaking, what they say. You know,
Oh, yeah.
like there's
Yeah.
There's actually a lot
Yeah.
to unpack.
It's
that we don't
probably
need to get into
an
on this
in-depth
podcast.
cultural discussion that, again,
It
like
is.
like the cultural history of Turkey, we should just go around that one.
We should just skim
yeah.
the surface.
We'll just rush.
Yeah.
We'll just rush long A. Yeah, don't take the most direct route. Just go long A on
A.
this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of long A, Blue, are you excited about the new Dust 2? What are your thoughts on that?
I haven't had a chance to test it yet, so
Okay.
I haven't been able to formulate my thoughts too much on it. It seems to be a pretty good change, though, and it seems that they didn't really change much with the map. They just gave it like a new paint job,
Yeah.
so
Looks spiffy though.
yeah, I mean, it looks great. Assuming it doesn't wreck everyone's FPS like some of the previous maps have done. They did pretty good with Inferno, so I think after Nuke, they kind of learned how to properly optimize the new map. So I don't think that's too much of an issue anymore. It's just more the bigger question is not when Dust 2 comes back into the pool.
Yeah.
It's more the question of which map is going to be removed.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I think that's the bigger hot button issue here. It's not Dust 2 coming back, but more wit's it going to take
Well,
out?
what do you
Okay,
want to see?
Yeah.
though?
Give
Like I want to know what Blue thinks.
Yeah. I know.
Everybody says cobblestone, but I actually like cobblestone. I think it's it's a different dichotomy in terms of the CT side. So I like to have that variance in there compared to just every map being CT sided. So I actually like cobblestone, but that's a not popular opinion. Yeah, I don't know entirely. I feel like I kind of want to see cache changed up a bit.
Yes.
That's the map that I would say because cache is becoming very like every cache map is similar nowadays, especially in North America. I don't get to cast too many of the European matches. Obviously, it's mainly North American stuff for me. But for the most part, every NA match is the same. Where like 90% of the T rounds are just guys sitting at a default, waiting till like 50 seconds of the clock, and then going for some pretty straightforward execute. They'll split mid control, something like that. It's maybe like 4 or 5 different strats on the T side that you see every single team use over and over and over again. There's just no innovation on it anymore. So I feel like the map needs to be changed to shake that up a little bit. I feel like we've reached the edge of what can be done on cache, and that maybe it needs some changes to shake things up a little bit.
That's very fair. Also, it looks like a butt. And this is not the first time I've said that, but as a viewer, like from a viewer's perspective, like not even like competitive, like meta type of thing, like looks like shit. Like the textures look gross. It's all brown.
Yeah. The thing is, though, is like CS:GO, especially the viewers, like never really been obsessed with that about how the game looks. So I don't think that's like too big of an issue. But I know like people have done like research and whatnot apparently, and like maps with more colorful color palettes, brighter neon colors almost, or apparently more appealing to the eye, so that apparently has a small effect on if viewers watch a game or not. So maybe that's what Valve is starting to update these maps for. Because if you notice, all the new maps, they do like a lot more like vibrant.
Yeah.
The colors are a lot brighter, as we had that shift in game development from like 2012 to now, where games all of a sudden are like way more colorful too, because they're more attractive to people.
I mean, I like watching Nuke for that exact reason. I know nobody likes to play it.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a cluster bomb, but it looks so sexy, right?
I would actually put Nuke in contention to be one of the maps to be removed, and I would
Yeah.
actually put that near the top of my list. The thing is, though, I'm not going to say it because I know it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Simply because
Right.
Valve just put it back in like a year and a half ago.
Yeah.
So it's very unlikely that they take it out of the pool again. So as much as I think a lot of pros would like to see Nuke removed, I just don't think it's realistic.
I would like to see cache removed. I'm very vocal about this as well. I internally refer to cache as Shedcago because it looks like a dense shed area where I don't know what happens there. I guess weapons are stored there, but I hate it. I hate the way it looks. And yeah, like you said, Blue, I think we've thoroughly explored the current version of cache. I think it's time to move on from Shedcago
Cash,
and go to Dust 2.
more
go
like
overseas.
ass.
Dust 2 kind of has that issue too, though. That's the flip of the coin side to things. There is that Dust 2 is also very 1 to 2 dimensional in terms of what you can do on that map from a strategy perspective. So it oftentimes just becomes who's a better aimer at this angle.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is what we often see, and we were seeing until it was removed there. So that's probably what it's going to become again, since there's been very minimal changes to the actual layout of the map.
Yeah, that's the thing. I can't really see the Dust meta changing at all because almost nothing changed
No,
aside
it's-
from a few lighting.
You're probably going to see very, very similar executes, maybe very some small changes, but for the most part, it's going to be pretty much the same map over again.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. Well, guys, feel like we've reached the natural conclusion of this podcast. The thing we do before we end, John, is just leave the floor open to you to anything that you wanted to discuss that maybe we didn't get a chance to, or just like any messages or shout outs that you want to give.
Or even news, really, like about yourself. Like if you've got something coming up, like maybe a new project or something like that.
Feel free. Yeah.
No, I don't have any projects or anything else coming up with that. The most interesting thing that happened to me is I changed my Twitter at the other day.
Hey, I saw that.
That's about it. So, since I'm not just doing CSGO stuff anymore, but besides that, it's thank you guys very much for the opportunity to bring me on, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
It's a real pleasure. We look forward to seeing more of you.
Yeah, it's a good in-depth talk.
I think one topic we didn't get to touch on too much that has been had my attention a lot has been the Overwatch League that we didn't get to go into
Ooh.
all that much.
Well,
and
we
that's
could talk
been-
about
Well,
Yeah, let's
I'm
go.
not kicking
That's,
you guys out just yet.
It's a very hot button issue.
that. Let's do it. Like, honestly, can we do it, Colin? Can we do
I'm
this?
ruling we can do
You guys
it.
are cool with that? Yeah.
I'm very cool with it, and
right.
I sense a take of the hot variety. Spicy.
I'm not going to go in too hard on this. I do have to say I'm very worried about the Overwatch League though, and what it could potentially mean for the future. More not so much European esports, but I think it really could make or break North American esports now. Because here's the thing, right? Is we've had North American esports has been growing pretty rapidly over the last 2 to 3 years or so, and it's been growing at a pretty steady rate. But I feel like the Overwatch League is just such an unnatural escalation of that, to the point where if it goes badly, it could just send everything crashing down to the ground. That has me very, very worried. There was that interview that Richard Lewis did a couple weeks back, and my thoughts on it are almost exactly echoed the same way, and that the game is very hard to spectate. The changes that Blizzard made recently are very good, but from obviously I've been busy, so I didn't get to watch the Overwatch World Cup all that much, but even from watching that, it doesn't seem to improve the core issue of the game, and that's just a very hard game to watch, even if you play it, even if you know the characters and whatnot. It's just so much happening, especially in a 6v6 environment, that it's very chaotic. It's very difficult to watch, and I feel like it's going to have major issues gathering a casual audience.
That's well said. I
Yeah.
can't disagree with your point on the
Yeah.
observing. I'm like everybody else. I play Overwatch. I find it quite an enjoyable game to be a part of. I can't watch it. I can't watch it.
No, it's an issue for me too, and it is kind of out of the stigma of that. Okay, they're creating this league that could potentially hurt the industry in a very negative way. But it's turned, essentially the changes they've made, right, have turned the game into a massive blob where you don't have a single clue what's going on, into two different color blobs where you still, for the most part, can't really discern what's going on unless the casters are doing an amazing job of breaking that down. But even then, right, you don't have to want to work to watch a broadcast. I don't want to have to sit there and think to know what I'm watching. I want to sit down and just enjoy it and have it be relatively, apparent what I'm watching in front of me. I don't want to have to like, oh, okay, this is, and constantly having it joggle my brain every 2 to 3 seconds about something new that I'm not aware of. Is my biggest issue with watching the core gameplay of it anyway, and that's like really fast paced, things like that. 6v6 doesn't help that either. The fact that you have to split the observing between third and first person is another issue. It's just so many hurdles that this game needs to overcome to actually become a very watchable subject, that I'm very worried that it's going to have a good amount of attention on it for the first 2 to 3 weeks when the league starts up, but then once we get into early 2018, say like mid-January, that a lot of that attention just completely dies down. I was hoping that there'd be some bigger announcement in terms of what would make the league more appealing to watch, but I really didn't get that at BlizzCon. I didn't really see anything. They just announced, like I said, that they have the ability to like reskin the characters to make it more easily viewable, and some spectator tools and whatnot, and like a top-down view and make it easier for casters to discern what's happening. But that's all that's all very minor changes to the core issues of the gameplay, which don't really seem to be addressed just yet.
I think I do think the changes helped. The ones
No,
that
they
we saw at
definitely did.
BlizzCon.
Yeah.
The other thing that they're doing, in my personal opinion, is they're doing a lot less perspective switching. So Canada, by the way, got to the grand finals.
There you go.
We did lose to South Korea. We took a game, and the games were all close. So big shout out to my boys on Team Canada, because I actually was one of the guys who could have been selecting that team. I was actually like one of the people you could vote for. I don't know. I think they just need a 10th guy, and they were like, "This guy's Canadian." So yeah, like, they did a great job with the team. So shout out to them. I mean, I'm super proud. I think everybody in Canada who follows Overwatch is super proud of these guys. But
Yeah.
what I wanted to say was, during this match, Flower is the star South Korean DPS player. He's frigging incredible, and correctly, the observers basically in team fights where he was important, they really just stuck on his perspective a lot.
In first person, I assume.
Yes, and I actually think that this is a good way to spectate the game, especially when you're playing a hero like Widow that's hanging back. You're seeing a lot of the battlefield in front of them. like in a certain way, the observers have to use the characters that are being played, which is not the case for other games, right? Like MOBAs are overhead, and in CS, yeah, maybe you follow the op or what, but like really, they're all the same person, just with different weapons. And in Overwatch, sometimes you have to look and say, like, this guy's in a good position to see everything.
Yeah.
So let's spectate this guy. Also, it helps that Flower is just frigging incredible at the game. So, like, you get to see him make incredible shots, and it's, like, pretty hype-inducing to watch that. But on the other hand, it is still difficult to watch. I agree with you on that, Blue.
Yeah.
I don't think
I think
it's been solved or anything. I think there's a lot of work to do.
I think that they've brought on a lot of really good people, a lot of the right people as well, to make sure that this game can be the best product as possible. But I think the issues with the Overwatch League stem from more the core game, more so than anything with the viewing experience or whatnot. And that the game is very, very chaotic, very fast-paced. 6v6, I wouldn't say is the optimal format. I would say that something like 4v4 is going to be way more viewable if they went down to that. But you know, the game is played at 6v6 unless they decided to make that much of a drastic change, which probably is not going to happen. Let's be honest here. That's a huge change. It's really unrealistic to expect Blizzard to make that much of a drastic change. So we're basically stuck with it, and we just have to make sure that the people that are brought on board understand that these issues are very big issues, and that hopefully they can try to adjust it and make it as good of a viewing experience as possible. I think that what you said there, where they're focusing on players that are more so kind of out of the big blob that often happens in those team fights. That's important, but it often comes down to a choice, right? Like when you go into a big team fight, it's oftentimes, there's the whole stigma with where the whole game is just surrounding, let's wait for ults to charge up. One team has ults, we go in, all right, now we gotta wait again. And it's just 2 minutes of nothing happening. Again, I don't watch Overwatch that much, so I don't know if that's the case anymore and whether they've corrected that. But if it is the case, then that's a very core issue, because all these games are gonna be very repeated. There's not gonna be a lot of interesting plays going on. But thankfully, we do have these really good players that are playing characters that can make things interesting like that. And when you have guys like Flower, I think that definitely helps the case. Is you don't necessarily have to make the choice anymore between going to someone in first person and just having to not see 80% of the fight except for this person's perspective, or going to a third person perspective. While you get to somewhat see everything, you get to see the blob at least from third person, but then you don't get to appreciate the individual skill of those players because you're not watching it from anyone's first person perspective, where they're actually aiming, and especially for like hit scan characters and things like that, where you can really appreciate someone's good aim and good accuracy and good positioning, things like that.
Yeah, to that token, also for focusing on a single player, not only is that important for like a spectator perspective, but also for building a storyline for that person as well.
Yes.
Which is incredibly important at this stage of the game, because quite frankly, no one knows who any of the Overwatch players are other than maybe Seagull, and he arguably maybe doesn't really deserve that spotlight.
Damn. Okay, well,
I mean,
that's hot. I got a
results
hot take
wise.
as soon as you're done. As soon as you're done sitting
Results
on
wise.
that campfire.
I don't know enough to say whether that's true or not, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, like for instance, like the way that a lot of the teams are kind of doing their brand building on Twitter is like, hey, look at this player. Yeah. And I was like, I don't care. It's like, oh, who was this person? One of our Overwatch players as a kid. It's his childhood photo. I'm like, I don't.
You don't know who he is as an adult.
I don't care.
Why do you want to know who he is as a kid?
Yeah. So it's really interesting that they're trying to do it from that angle, but maybe this is kind of like an accidental thing. But I think like focus on the star players.
I'm going to say I think Seagull is much maligned for streaming when playing pro wasn't profitable. I think he really just did the smart thing. He's a great player. He did absolutely the smart thing, and I think there are a lot of people who are playing on like tier 2 Overwatch teams who are like, damn, I wish I could have done that.
Yeah.
So I think he's a great player, and yeah, he's obviously a very popular player. So there's like that concept that he's like not good at the game, but he's really good at the game, and I don't hold the streaming against him at all. This is my opinion.
You can't really fault him for making that choice, right? Because
No,
if we go back to like June, or I forget exactly when he made that statement. I do remember the day that happened. I think that was more towards early summer, but in that time, right? Like Overwatch League originally was announced in the 2016 BlizzCon to start in 2017, and while that is going to be technically correct, we didn't really get any major details on how it was going to work until the last month or two, as the teams and everything were being announced. That was that point in early summer where everybody was like, all right, is this even going to happen? We don't know anything about it. And everybody was just freaking out over it, especially all the players that were panicking because because when they announced it, it basically killed the scene in Overwatch. And
especially in Europe.
Yeah, we didn't see like, any non-Blizzard tournaments happening after that point because no one knew when it was going to start. No one knew any details. So I think people were afraid to put an event on the calendar and then come to find out that the Overwatch League was going to be over, and then that would just kill that event in its entirety. They'd get like random players for it. So it was. I mean, you couldn't really blame people like ESL and whatnot for not choosing to run Overwatch events anymore because they simply just didn't know if the Overwatch League was going to turn into an LCS equivalent that would make their tournaments useless, essentially.
I guess in regards to your second point as well about the potential failure of the Overwatch League having a chilling effect or worse on the outside investment in the esports landscape, I definitely share your fear.
It's
Yeah.
massive if you think about how much money is invested into the Overwatch League that's also invested into other esports, and the shattering glass effect that could have if the Overwatch League turns out to be a massive failure.
The only thing that makes me feel a little bit more safe is that Riot's franchise NALCS is coming out at the same time, and I kind of feel more confident that will be a success.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm hoping that an investor is going, oh shit, these guys lost a lot of money with this what's this shooting game, Overwatch, but these guys did pretty well with this non-shooting game. What's it called? League of Legends. You know what I mean? So like maybe they bounce. I don't know.
That's the one hope, is that people do see the success in the LCS. That's been proven now for the last 3-4 years, however long it's been running. And hopefully that continues now that franchising is becoming a thing, and that we see that continued success. And hopefully, if Overwatch League, I'm not saying it will be a complete failure, but
no, of course not.
It's basically going to be one way or the other. It's going to be a massive success or a terrible failure, and everyone's going to regret going into it. But but let's say it is a massive failure. At least there's the hope that the LCS does well, and that kind of saves things for those that were invested into that. The problem is, though, right, is there's just, you look at all the teams that are invested into it that probably will suffer massive fallout if this goes poorly. Cloud9, Immortals, the list goes on. And then you also have pretty major sponsors across esports that are, and this is why I say it affects North America more than it affects Europe, that are invested pretty heavily into North American esports, that this could suffer fallout from if the Overwatch League goes bad. Comcast Spectador, or whatever the official company name is, for instance, owns the Philadelphia slot. That's right. Comcast/Xfinity also has pretty big investment across esports in general. I don't know if they still sponsor EG, but they're still pretty tight knit with ESL, things like that. If their investment in the Overwatch League goes badly, do they all of a sudden have second thoughts about their investments into EG, into ESL, and start pulling out of that? And then that has a major fallout effect because, companies like ESL will then lose massive amounts of cash from that. And then that could lead to less tournaments. Something like ESL Pro League, for instance, could be put on the cutting room floor because of Overwatch League's failure. If we really want to give the worst case drastic example. I'm not saying that will happen, but it is very possible that it could happen if the Overwatch League goes badly.
Exactly.
Yeesh, it's scary, isn't it?
A little bit, yeah.
Since we're talking about Overwatch League, can I drop a nuclear level hot take right now?
Go ahead.
Your takes have been escalating in Celsius.
We're at DEF CON something.
The
DEF CON
Mercury.
hot take.
Yeah.
Here we go. Okay, so we're talking about the success of Overwatch League, right? Its potential future success. And on the weekend, I was not at BlizzCon. I was watching from home, and I saw a lot of tweets from my Overwatch colleagues that were like, "Look at the viewership. This is obviously going to do well." And
That's the...
Yeah, I want your opinion just one sec, Blue, okay? But as somebody who followed Heroes of the Storm, is a dedicated Heroes of the Storm fan still to this day, even though I maybe don't get to write about it as much as I'd like to. BlizzCon viewership doesn't mean anything.
No, I agree entirely.
It doesn't mean anything. You think it means... when I was at BlizzCon 2016... The Heroes of the Storm area was packed, insane hype. I don't know what the viewership numbers were, but I guarantee you they were better than they were throughout the year. Just because Overwatch had a lot of viewers at BlizzCon does not mean that you can make a smarmy tweet about how, oh, everybody hated on Overwatch League, but look at how many people are watching. That's not, like, you guys have never watched a BlizzCon if you think that's true. You've literally never watched a BlizzCon. I'm sure StarCraft got great viewership.
I was watching.
Yeah, but it's not during the year. You're not going to see those numbers. So if anything, you should take the BlizzCon numbers, bring it down to like 2/3 of that number, and that's going to be your like peak viewership for big events during the year, like absolute peak. This is obviously again my opinion, but like statistically, look at those numbers. This doesn't mean it's going to be a success. It still could be, and I'm an optimist in all this. I think I'm probably the most optimistic person at this table right now about the Overwatch League.
That's probably true.
I think
But
so.
don't do that. It looks so bad on the community too. Because you're like, oh, well, look at all these viewers. Obviously, it's going to be... No, that doesn't mean anything. It's a one-off event. It's the biggest Blizzard event of the year.
It's all just like buzz press, really, because you have every major gaming journalism outlet, and even like normal non-gaming news that are like going to be at BlizzCon, because it's such a massive thing that happens every year. Blizzard pours millions of dollars into making sure that happens every single year. So that viewership is just unrealistic to expect that year round, especially considering that this wasn't even the Overwatch League. This was the Overwatch World Cup, which even I'm interested in that, because that's a very unique concept. I wish that there was a more competent version of that in CS:GO. We kind of have it with the what's it? I forget.
ESWC.
No.
There's also WCA. But
eFrag runs. I forget what they call it.
The world championship.
The world championship.
Already said the world championship.
Yeah,
right.
that eFrag runs every year. Unfortunately, that has some organizational issues, and the prize pool isn't the greatest, and it's usually on like some weird streaming platform. So a lot of people don't tune into that. But if someone did that, like someone like ASL did that, I feel like it would have a lot of interest behind it. So the fact that it's being done in Overwatch, I think, is something really unique and really cool. So even I'm somewhat interested in watching that, because cheer for USA or Canada or whatever. You just want to see your team win, which is you have like a unique identity tied to that. But this is not the case with the Overwatch League. No one has any clue what these teams are. They've forced the teams to come up with new brands to align with these cities. But what's even weirder about that, right, is that the cities, they're not playing from the cities yet. I think from what I've heard, that's going to become in like the second or third season. They're all just playing from LA for the first season. Yeah. But the problem is too, they're not like picking players from Houston or Los Angeles or whatever. I'm pretty sure the London team is primarily like Korean. South Korean players. So how do you justify that alignment to a city when the players have no alignment to that city? It's just like, it doesn't make any sense when you think about it. So things like that, I feel like people are going to have problem associating like an actual fan base behind these teams based on their locations. I don't think that the city thing is really gonna work out that well. And then, I'm going off a little bit of a tangent here, but getting back more to the point about the viewership issue is that while, again, there's going to be a lot of buzz press behind the Overwatch League within the first month or so of it, once that's gone, then what kind of viewership you're going to be looking at? Okay, maybe you'll get somewhere between 20 and 50K per broadcast if the games are good, but that's good, right? That's really good, especially for like something in CS:GO. But is it $20 million per team good is the thing. Is it realistic that you're going to get your investment back when that's the viewership you have? You need like 100 to 200K on every broadcast, I think, to justify that kind of a broadcast or to justify that kind of an investment from each of these teams. And I just don't think that's realistic in the long run.
I think a lot of it comes down to patience too. Like, can they build a viewership? I don't know, but I would argue that if you look at Heroes this year, a lot of their viewership numbers have gone up. It's not insanely huge. It's not a massive esport, but their viewership is trending up. But how long are the people that paid this money for these slots going to wait for viewership to go up? I don't know.
You have to hope that Blizzard at least has kind of prepped I assume that like Cloud9 and Immortals, the teams that have invested in, are aware of this. They're aware that this is going to be an issue. But you have to hope that Blizzard has kind of prepped, like the Craft Group and all these new groups that are coming into it, of the fact that it is going to take a pretty long time for the viewership to scale up. And I hope that they realize that and are not expecting some immediate success or return within the first like 6 to 18 months or whatever.
It is such a bizarre concept when you think about it. Like when we first got the Blizzard League announced, we were talking about the geolocation, how that might go some ways towards solving the esports fandom problem, because that's another thing we talk about on this podcast. Like, how do you become a fan of an esports team? Your mom's not, you didn't get it from your buddies, aren't a fan of it, probably not mine anyway, right? And you don't go down to the stadium downtown to watch them. So how do you become a fan? And then we were like, oh, maybe the geolocation thing's going to help. Well, to your point, like, okay, the London Spitfire, cool. Cloud9, a bunch of South Korea. Like, what?
Yeah.
Why do I give a shit?
It's like if you're not going to enforce, having to make sure these players are from at least a general location, or at least a majority of them are from that, with, at least make it so that they're from the UK or something like that, then how do you say, so for me, right, I'm from Philly. If the Philadelphia...
Oh, there you go. You got your team, man.
Yeah, so like, say that's the same for the Philadelphia team. But the Philadelphia team is all South Koreans. How do I become a fan of a team that's the Philadelphia team, but they're all South Koreans? Like, I don't have any shared identity with these players or anything like that. So I don't see how I'm going to become a fan of this, and how the regional franchising to these cities is really going to make any sense if you're not going to enforce those kinds of rules.
Yeah.
Well, here's one. Oh, Dennis, I
don't-
don't want to cut you off.
They don't even live in these cities. That's the other thing too, which that'll change, I think, by season 2 or 3. But for season 1, it just makes it really weird. Even the fact that they've now done divisions between the Atlantic and Pacific divisions that they announced the other day, even that for season 1 doesn't really make much sense to me, considering that they're all playing in the same place.
Yeah, I actually missed that announcement there. I didn't know that. So they're doing like conferences?
Yeah. I think I didn't read too much into it, so I don't know for sure if they're going to completely separate them, but that seems to be the case.
Okay.
So that seems a little bit weird when they're all playing from the same location.
Yeah, it's like we're the best in the West. The west side of the stadium. We're over here.
What were you going to say? My point got lost, I think.
Okay, I was just going to say one of the things that like we think about when we think about sports leagues is that most of these sports leagues are confined to a specific region of the world, or to two main regions that are very disparate. So like look at hockey, the NHL, mostly Americans, Canadians, select European countries,
Yes.
and Russia.
Yeah.
And then if you go to the KHL, which is the Russian domestic league,
Yes.
it is mostly Russians, and then some Americans and Canadians, and select European players who can't make an NHL roster or can make more money playing in the KHL, playing in Russia, right? So you're used to having a certain set of players that play in that league. American football, basically all Americans. There's some Canadians, right? But mostly Americans.
Yeah.
If you look at soccer / European football, again, mostly European nations, right? So what is there's never been a league quite like this where literally it's like, yeah, I know people are going to laugh. Oh, it's a North American league. There's so many Okay, sure. Yes, there are a lot of North American teams. But we've never had a league truly like this, where it's a truly global league, and literally anybody from any part of the world could play in it feasibly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to say here. Like, yes, technically anyone can play in the NHL. There's no rule against like a player from, South Africa playing in the NHL, but there aren't a ton of South Africans in the NHL, right?
Yeah.
So in this case, Korea is dominant in esports generally, not all esports, CS:GO obviously being a nice thing. So, but they're very dominant, and so I get the whole like, hey, I don't want to cheer for a team full of Koreans, but if the team full of Koreans is the best team, and there's a fair amount of debate about whether or not that's even the case for this team. I've seen a lot of managers tweeting like, there's so many great Korean teams that are better than current Korean teams, but I digress. Why do you not want to cheer for them? Because, like, at the end of the day, if that's the best team to represent your city and win things...
Well, I don't think we're saying that
You know?
people actively don't want to cheer for Koreans. That's not it at all. It's just that
more-
you're trying to find a thread that you can grab, a reason to care, right? Okay, so they're attached to a city in name only for right now, right? And it's just like, okay, now I have to go to reason B to care. No one on the roster has a cool story about being brought up in Philly and making it, and
None of them even, I think for the most part, right? You look at, again, I hate to harp on like one team as an example here, but we use the London team because that's the one that I'm most familiar with.
Sure.
But to use like, have they even set foot in London? Like, it's like even going to that, which again, I'll give the caveat that I think most of these issues are going to be fixed going into the second or third season, but it still continues to add like more and more black marks onto this league for its initial season, which I think is going to be the most important season. And the fact that they're doing this now and all these issues are going to be present until they fix this and they do the regional arenas or whatever the plan is for that. It's going to remain a very, very core issue in that, okay, it doesn't really make sense to have these regional teams for these cities or whatever when the players may have not even ever been to these cities to begin with.
The way that you described it, Colin, though, it's almost like you're like, oh, they're attached to the team in name, or they're attached to the city in name only. That almost feels like geolocation just fails immediately if that's people's reasoning, right?
How do you mean?
Well, like the idea behind these geolocated teams is to get people interested in the team and to build a local fan base to which the organization can advertise and eventually sell tickets. Hopefully, that's the goal.
That is the
Yeah,
dream.
yeah.
That's the dream.
Right?
Yep.
But if you're like, well, yeah, they're the Philadelphia. I forget what the Philadelphia team is. Oh, Fusion. Right?
I wanted to say Freedom, but that's an Elton John song.
No, I was hoping they'd be called Freedom, but I think maybe there are some issues there. I don't know.
Philadelphia Freedom.
But yeah, it's like if your first thought is yes, they're attached in name, but
Yeah.
they don't play here, they aren't here.
Yeah.
Then it feels like geolocation has already sort of failed.
Wait,
right?
why?
Like,
But because they're not geolocated. Like if they're
that's
all,
but that's what I'm saying. Like
They're literally
they
all
have-
in LA.
yeah,
right?
if they're all Koreans, that's friggin' great. That's fantastic. If I can go down to the stadium and watch them play, and I can get that emotional attachment, I can
Yeah.
buy that jersey from the vendor, kind of thing. But if it's all arm's length, if there's no way that I can reach out and connect with these guys, you know, to reach out and touch them, metaphorically speaking, like it's difficult. There's a barrier. Why don't I just throw a dart at a chart with all the Overwatch logos on it? You know.
I almost wonder then if we might declare geolocation a failure too early, in the sense that we won't really see it until season 2.
Yeah, that's the
You know
thing,
what I'm
right?
saying?
Is we unfortunately can't judge this too much until we see what the plans are to align it more with the cities in season 2 and season 3. But it just seems like there wasn't even really a point with adding the city association until you got to that point to where okay, just have these teams with. If you want to do new brand names, that's whatever. I get you want to keep the teams in Overwatch in case they get resold or for whatever reason that they decided to do that. But then just wait on the city part of it until after you get to the second or third season, or at the very least, we would hope for the first season they don't put too much of an emphasis on the city part because
Yeah.
it literally means nothing for some of these teams until they start, relocating them to those cities. It means nothing at all, especially for teams like the London team that's primarily just South Koreans.
So quickly to wrap this up, do you guys have any team that you feel like you want to cheer for? Because you actually have Philadelphia as a city.
Yeah.
You're so lucky.
None of us have that.
In the spreadsheet where they first revealed the Overwatch League, Toronto was like one of the maybe here, maybe in Toronto. It's
Yeah.
like nah.
Well, that's the
It
other
didn't
thing is
happen.
how did that does the investor just decide which city they want, or did there have to be some approval process for that? How did that work out? Because now we have 2 LA teams already, and that's already weird too, which I don't understand.
And by the way,
point
and
behind that.
I know we're trying to wrap this up, and Josh asked a very specific question.
Yes,
but
I did.
All the other teams, they purport to have a tying into the area, into the vibe of the city as part of the branding strategy, right?
Yeah.
Except for LA, they're the Valiant and
Gladiators.
The Gladiators.
Oh,
yeah. You remember like when we were in LA and those Gladiators came by? That was sick.
Yeah, and there were some people who valiantly fought against the Gladiators.
It's like, what the fuck? I'll answer your question really quickly though.
Yes.
I want to cheer for the London Spitfire. You know why?
Why?
A, they have the best branding.
Yes.
B, it's Cloud9,
that's a hot take,
and I
though.
like Cloud9 CS. So like, I don't know, maybe Stewie could play some Overwatch or something. I don't know. So that's
Wow.
Remember, but
There's no smoke for him to run through, though,
was
so I don't know.
Well, that's the thing too, right? Is you can't even associate those brands together. They're supposed to be like 2 entirely separate things.
Yeah.
So I imagine Blizzard's going to have rules to where you're not allowed to like have tie-ins between your
But this-
Overwatch League team and your Cloud9 CS:GO team.
This is the thing, Blue. Like, it's what I was talking about. It's like I'm desperate. I'm grasping at straws here. I need to find an emotional connection to some team.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I like this brand's other team.
But you're not allowed to do that. Though. It's the Blizzard rules. So
Cloud who?
Now, in Blizzard's defense on that front, they do mention the team ownership and every one of the press releases for these things.
Okay,
so,
so, yeah, so
it's
that's
not
not-
like they're
that's not too bad,
trying
then.
to pretend they don't exist.
Sure,
It's not like
suppressing
yeah, Optic doesn't exist. Welcome to
It
Outlaws.
definitely, it definitely does seem like almost. I hesitate to say malicious, but I'm going to use it simply because I can't think of another word right now. So it almost seems like that, in that they're trying to hold these brands hostage, and where we're not going to let your brand get any additional recognition out of this. You have to establish a new one, and it has to work within our ecosystem in order for it to grow. Now, the rationale that I heard from like Overwatch analysts and stuff was like, oh, they did this so that in case they want to sell the franchises later down the line, then it's that they don't have to sell their whole organization. Which, yes, that's true, but you're talking like 5 to 10 years in the future, because there's no way anyone's going to see a return in a $20 million investment, especially in esports, for at least 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, if that was a worry, why didn't we worry about that later down the road instead of just
Yeah.
letting these teams at least grow themselves now? Because it was just another really weird thing that they decided to do with this league, in my opinion.
So who are you cheering for, though? Are you cheering for the Fusion? I need to know.
I don't know, actually. I don't like the way the branding looks and everything like that. It looks kind of weird. It's
Agreed.
called the Fusion, but the logo is a P with a like atom around it or whatever.
Yeah.
It doesn't look that appetizing to me. I like the I think that the Optic brand did the best job, the Houston Outlaws, because I think that one did a really good job of establishing like an identity with with the region while still keeping like a cool gamer brand, because they did like the 6-shooters with that made like the bullhorn skull and things like that. I thought that was really cool.
That was cool.
They probably did the best job in my opinion. But there's some teams that have like really bad branding. Like the Excelsior is just
Oh shit,
Yeah,
man!
it's
I don't even know what the
get us
logo is.
started.
It's just
Yeah.
it's like an optical illusion almost.
Yeah.
If you look at it,
Freaking
I said those exact words.
It's a sailboat.
I said those exact words, and I got nuts. I'm like, I like tried to unfocus my eyes, and then like put my eyes real close, and then
You can
like,
see
back it out.
Diva if you just blur
Yeah,
your
Diva,
eyes.
Diva.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, the optical illusion thing is real. I have no idea what's up with that branding. I'm really sorry, New York. I'm sure we'll see another logo for season 2. I'd be so
I mean,
surprised.
if they
we
continue
didn't
to
see
expand, then odds are there'll be a second New York team with the way every other sport tends to work. So
It's true. Dennis, who are you going to cheer for?
it. Yeah, Dennis. Give it to me.
I'm gonna go with the Spitfire as well. Just the branding
Oh,
is
shit.
completely on point. That
Shit.
video, that intro video where they had the Spitfire coming through.
Yeah.
Boom, one of the clouds, a Cloud9 logo.
Yeah, baby.
See,
yeah.
that's the other thing is they did have
very
that Cloud,
subtle.
they had the Cloud9 logo
They-
in that video. So
Cloud9 did that very subtly. I liked how they did that at
Yeah.
least. So
And as far as I know, like the Spitfire is an American plane. Is that correct?
no, it is a British plane.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, it was
I'm
made
stupid.
by
that would have been a big oversight. If
made by
Yeah,
Super.
but it would have been funny, like, hey, we're actually American. Hey, like the
think-
Mustangs.
I mean,
Like they were a huge
London Mustangs.
part of the Battle of Britain, right? The Spitfires,
Yeah,
like
it was-
that's probably why they like one of the reasons they occupy like a culturally iconic place,
Hmm.
and because like that's like they're the big when the Nazis invaded by air, there was the Battle of Britain, right?
Yes.
and like the ragtag sort of British Royal Air Force plus a bunch of foreigners, some Canadians, by the way.
Polish as well.
Managed to hold off an air armada.
So I do have to say, this is one thing here with the branding, at least, that for some of these teams. Unfortunately, not all the teams are doing a very good job with this, but I do think that some of these teams are going about it in the right way, and that they are trying to establish identities that align with the region. You think Outlaws, the Bull Skull, perfect for a Texas team. Spitfire, really good as well. The problem is not every team is doing this. Excelsior, no clue. Los Angeles, Valiant, Los
Dignity.
Angeles doesn't align to it. San Francisco, again, not, but they seem to be starting fresh. So there's Energy tends to be pretty good with their branding, so I feel like they're going to do a pretty good job with that. But the thing is, right, this, like, to get back to my point, like I said, some teams are doing a really good job with trying to tie it into the region, even if their rosters aren't inherently going to be associated with that region. But other teams are just, again, completely ignoring it. So it begs the question once more, all right, why are you associated to this region then if not even your branding is going to align with that?
Exactly.
Yeah, Super Marine Spitfire, obviously super important part of the Battle of Britain and seen as a symbol of the air victory over Britain during the Battle of Britain. So I think that's a great tie-in.
Yeah.
I'm very tempted to also say Spitfire.
Okay.
I am a big fan of military history, so like it's kind of like almost just handed it to me.
Go against the crowd. Give us your other
I
pick.
can't.
Okay.
I'm gonna go with Spitfire. I actually
That logo
love
is
this.
sick.
I love the city of Houston as a city.
Okay.
So I do want to cheer for the Outlaws for that reason. I do love Houston. I think it's a great city. And I'm not a huge optic fan, but I love the logo. I love the branding. So
right.
it's going to be between those two. I guess whichever team impresses me more in season 1, maybe I'll be a lifelong fan and I'll buy a jersey.
I
maybe
love
who
it.
knows. So.
Which that's the goal, right? That's what Blizzard wants. They want these franchises to have like lifelong attachments to like people like the Raiders and things like that in the NFL. They have these massive fan attachments. They want that for Overwatch. I just think it's going to be a little bit hard to do until we get to seasons 2 and 3 when these teams are actually located in the cities that they're supposed to be representing.
And by then, maybe we'll have a Toronto team.
I hope so. I think
Or a Montreal
or
team.
just more than one European team too.
Yeah.
Which was another weird thing.
I think we're all trepidatious about it, but we're all hopeful, and we hope it succeeds for the sake of esports.
Yep.
And with that, guys, John, I want to let you give any shout-outs or any final messages you wanted to do before we sign off. Maybe to all your fans.
No, just a big thank you to you guys for having me on. I appreciate your time and bringing me out here and give me the tour as well of the offices here. And thanks. I'd be happy to do it again in the future.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Yeah.
And with that said,
Ditto.
this has been what's that, Dennis?
I said, yeah. Yep. Yep.
Can you say it again? Can you say it louder, please?
Ditto. Yep.
Okay, great.
I'm gifting that as soon as we're done here.
God.
Dennis.
Excellent.
I realized what. Okay, continue.
Exploitable, buddy.
With that said, this has been the theScore eSports podcast. For Josh Burry, for Dennis Gonzalez, this is Colin McNeil saying until next time, GG, and a big thank you to Blue.